This, of course, is certainly not happy news to the discourse.
Exactly, yes. Kingsley. And if you recall, that edition of the program also provided the information that of the 10 million electricity consumers collated between 2012 and December 2019, only 4.8 million are metered, leaving the rest, the 5.2 million, unmetered and several millions uncaptured as well.
Well, that's the grave situation for the sector, as it were. It is certainly obvious that electricity consumer enumeration in the country has been rather jerky, and fixing tariff on available capacity is indeed another headache altogether.
There are certainly several issues in the sector when it comes to energy consumption and billing, judging from the different attempts at reforms since 2005 to date. Why is the provision of these meters appearing so cumbersome?
So, no question to ask, of course, is why has the demand for meters over the years not been met? And why is also the number of metered consumers in the country at present not increasing? And what exactly is the problem of getting the metered consumers into the pool for billing? My name is Kingsley Osadolo. I welcome you to today's edition of Good Morning Nigeria. We're live on the network service of the NTA.
And I'm Kirian Umayo. Many thanks for joining us on this program, coming to you as always from Abuja, the capital city of Nigeria. And of course, we will expect the complimentary segments of the show, which include newspaper review, business, and others. Let's now begin with Osman Ali, who has the morning news highlights. Good morning, Osman.
Good morning, Kirian and Kingsley. Here is the news highlight. The federal government is putting in place special intervention for the development of science and technology. President Muhammadu Buhari stated this while declaring open this year's Science and Technology exhibition taking place in Abuja. He says the greatest resource Nigeria has is human capital, adding that the administration will continue to encourage youth to key into science and technology for the socio-economic well-being of the country. President Buhari announced scholarship award for the first time with 3 winners of the exhibition up to PhD degree level. And in the meantime, the National Executive Committee of the governing All Progressives Congress, scheduled to hold this Tuesday, has been postponed. This is the outcome of a strategic meeting between President Muhammadu Buhari and members of the Progressive Governors Forum.
And show appreciation to Mr. President, how he has given access to each of us individually and collectively. And among the issues we discussed was the need, with the resolution that the governors have taken, to work together and resolve all the issues in our party.
In the meantime, a meeting of the National Working Committee of the All Progressives Congress has been scheduled for this Tuesday, March 17, 2020, at the party's National Secretariat by 12 noon. The party's National Publicity Secretary, Larry Issa Onilu, in a statement says all members of the National Working Committee are expected to attend as important matters concerning the party will be considered. Recall that a court of appeal on Monday stayed action on the execution order of a high court restraining the APC national chairman Adams Oshomole from further acting in that capacity. Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu of Lagos State has formally briefed President Muhammadu Buhari on the gas explosion that rocked part of Lagos State, leaving in its wake the destruction of lives and valuable property.
For a 2 billion fund that we believe might not speak to all of the things, but at least it will begin to speak to all of the immediate challenges. And the state government immediately have instructed that 250 million naira should be set aside and put into that fund. Before I left too, I had given instruction that Loma, Neighborhood Watch, and also LASEMA, they've immediately set in motion a cleaning up exercise, because we now need to begin to do restoration and restoration of the entire environment. So that, I imagine, had started.
The Federal Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, Disaster Management and Social Development has received with sadness the news of the oil pipeline explosion around Abule-Ado in Amuadorfin local government area of Lagos State, which affected the residents of Ijegun, Ikotun, Abeda, Abule-Ado, Okota, Isheri-Olofin, Festac and satellite towns. On receiving the news of the explosion, the ministry, through its agency, the National Emergency Management Agency, activated the Lagos State Emergency Management Agency with a view to rendering any assistance and disaster management expertise that may be required. The ministry added that it is working with the relevant stakeholders to provide national guidelines on industrial disasters such as pipeline explosions and will carry out pipeline safety sensitization programs in communities through which pipeline pass. The Minister Sadi Omar Farouk sends her condolence to Lagos State government, families of the deceased and all affected persons and organizations that have suffered from the loss, one loss or another. The federal government has flagged off a national integrated medical outreach program in the FCT. Vice President Yemi Osinbajo at the occasion says the program is aimed at sustaining the country's strategy on immunization that has led to appreciable achievements and to further improve primary health care services in the country.
The federal government is fully responsible for providing the required immunization, vaccines, in collaboration with our global partners to ensure consistent and sustainable availability of life-saving vaccines for all eligible children in Nigeria.
The program's objectives are, amongst others, to reach underserved populations with basic medical and surgical services, to curtail the paralysis of circulating vaccine-derived poliovirus infections.
And still on health, the increasing spread of the coronavirus pandemic in countries has prompted Nigeria to review the country's case definition. Sequel to that, 3 new countries comprising France, Germany and Spain have been added to the existing list of 5 high-risk countries with widespread community transmission. Minister of State for Health, Dr. Olorinumbe Mamora, announced this in Abuja when he updated the media on Nigeria's COVID-19 status as suspected case turned out negative in Enugu.
We are training health workers from all states in stages. This has been completed in Lagos and Ogun, well, apparently for obvious reasons. I've heard even some of my old friends say, oh, the black man's gene is resistant. And so, COVID is not for us. Don't forget, some black men, even from Africa, even from Nigeria, they are dead.
The Central Bank of Nigeria has announced 6 initial policy responses to combat the impact of COVID-19 on the economy. CBN Governor Godwin Emefiele says the first set of response was arrived at as a result of the CBN's understanding of the effect of the virus on the Nigerian people. The television stations in Nigeria, including the NTA, are now to pay for the forthcoming National Sports Festival, Edo 2020. This was contained in a statement issued by Chairman of the Marketing Subcommittee of the festival, Mike Itemuabo. This announcement is at the variance with the commitment made to the NTA by the Edo State Deputy Governor, Philip Shaibu, who doubles as the chairman of the local organizing committee.
One thing is very clear. If NTA must pay to cover the games, NTA is out. And if NTA is out, 70 to 80% of Nigerians will not have the opportunity in sharing in the thrills of the festival.
We are also thankful to the management of NTA to have accepted to also carry out their mandate, and we have agreed with NTA that they are going to be the host broadcaster of this event.
And that's the news highlight. Good Morning Nigeria continues with Kingsley and Karian, but that will be after this break. Stay with us.
Not so fast. Look, I'm tired. I I want to check out of this country for greener pastures.
Just calm down for a moment. Please sit down. Do you have a job where you're going to?
No, but someone is arranging,
Listen, Alinko. Checking out of this country without proper planning means one thing. Unimaginable begin. You know, I've been in the diaspora, but legitimately doing great things at home and abroad. As I've been saying, without the proper footing abroad, the risk is not worth it. Listen, Alinko, it's better to be home than be trapped abroad, or even end up in prison.
In Nigeria, there is one sound we need to silence. So let's silence toothache before it starts with Oral-B All-Round Protection. Its advanced technology helps prevent both tooth holes and gum problems that can lead to tooth loss. It strengthens your teeth, giving them all-round protection. Because the only sound we really want to hear is that of our future. For healthier, stronger teeth in 1 week.
My name's Mr. Muftau Abiodun Balogun. We started this business 4 years ago, and this is the production outlet where we do about 4,000 to 5,000 birds per day. With the closure of the border recently, we've been experiencing massive surge in demand. Our sales per day now is going to be between 15 to 20,000 birds. We needed to expand all avenues because of the multiplier effect it's creating. And the most interesting thing about this closure is that many of my farmers today are farmers we recruited recently, and they are young graduates. What the government is doing will lead us right. And I can tell you, if the government sustains this thing, sky will not even be our limit.
You're watching Good Morning Nigeria, and it's now time for business. The Central Bank of Nigeria has announced 6 initial policy responses to combat the impact of COVID-19 on the economy of the country. This and more on Business News with Abdulkarim Zurumi.
Governor Godwin Emefiele says the first set of response was arrived at as a result of the CBN's understanding of the effect of the virus on the Nigerian people. These policies include interest rate reduction, the creation of a $20 billion credit support, among others.
They are saying if your loan was initially meant to be a, say, 3-year loan, where, for instance, you were paying on a monthly basis, say you took 10 million naira, you are paying, say, 100,000 naira as repayment, or a 3-year loan. We are saying we are going to grant the banks the dispensation where they can restructure your loan from 3 years to 6 years.
Meanwhile, the federal government has resolved to review its economic plans, prioritize expenditure in favor of major capital expenditure that will create jobs. Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning, Zainab Ahmed, said this is aimed at mitigating unfolding events of COVID-19 threats and the oil price war.
It's a reality call for us that we must develop a non-oil attitude to everything that we do. It is a time for us to review what we have planned and to prioritize expenditure in favor of major capital expenditure that will have greater impact, that will create job and visibility, and also enhance the ease of doing business in our country.
Now let's head to the floor of the Nigerian Stock Exchange to see how the market fared on Monday, 16th of March 2020. With business news, Abdul Karim Zermi.
Many thanks, Abdul Karim Zurmi, for the business package. Next for us is a review of some of today's newspapers.
Now, Bayo Altoyebi has just joined us. That's our newspaper reviewer. Bayo, good morning and welcome to the program.
Good morning, Kyria. Thank you very much. Good morning, Kinsley. Good morning, Nigeria.
Good to see you.
Yeah. Let's begin with the leadership newspaper. The lead story in the leadership newspaper this morning is coronavirus. Federal government may suspend $22.7 billion loan with 4 riders to that. Rules out travel ban, names more high-risk countries. 10 quoted companies lose 2.4 trillion naira to coronavirus. CBN announces 50 billion naira credit facility for affected businesses. 33 trillion debt stock not sustainable, that DMO. Now the PMB court save Oshomale with the rider APC governors suspend NEC meeting indefinitely. That story is on page 4. Actually, the lead story on the newspaper is detailed on page 4 of the newspaper. Now, at the bottom, we have NCDC sets up Bauchi Center for Lassa fever, kills district head. That's on page 11. Death toll from Lagos explosion hits 20. That's on page 13. Poor sleeping habit affects mental health. That's according to experts. You can read more on page 13 of Leadership newspaper.
All right, we'll take a look at the Daily Sun newspaper. There's an earpiece there beside the nameplate, agony and tears as Lagos explosion death toll rises to 23. The story is in greater detail on page 38, but there are 2 riders to it. 3-year-old baby picked up from rubble, survives, and parents unconscious. 3-year-old baby picked up from rubble, survives, parents unconscious. Sanwo-Olu sets up 2 billion naira relief fund for victims. And there's a strip headline there that's immediately below the nameplate. It says, Buhari and Gbajabiamila meet over exclusion of Southeast from 22.7 billion naira loan and APC crisis. That's on page 39. APC, that's the kicker. Buhari intervenes and Shomole bounces back. Appeal Court reinstates chairman. President approves indefinite postponement of NEC meeting. Fayemi, El-Rufai, Bello, and Buni absent at Peace Parley. And then right there at the bottom of the page, below the photograph showing the president at yesterday's event, which took place in Abuja, is COVID-19. Nigerian doctor dies in Canada. The federal government inaugurates task force and OK screening of passengers from Germany, France, and Spain. That's page 39. Executive and National Assembly clash over rising national debt as PDP goes to court. That's page 37. Court orders Olori Shakin and Buratai to produce army personnel in Wadume case. That's page 4. JAMB releases results of 157,000 candidates. Page 3.
Well, let's start with the update in Lagos. 2 other bodies have been recovered, bringing the death toll in the Lagos explosion to about 20. Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu was at the State House to brief President Muhammadu Buhari, and in the interim, he has set up a committee headed by the Deputy Governor to actually inquire and find out what led to the explosion. In the meantime, a relief fund of 2 billion has been established by the Lagos State government. Lagos State has provided a seed money of 250 million to kickstart it. The governor says, I'm not interested in the speculation about the cost. That is why we have set up a committee to find out. And for now, all we are appealing to publicly spirited people is to help us provide succor for those who are victims. Meanwhile, lessons will have to be learned from what happened, particularly in the area of right-of-way for utility facilities, power, water, gas, petroleum, as related to settlement and construction. If that is taken into consideration, we will save ourselves such peril in no distant future.
Well, the cause of such explosions is always known. It's vandalism. It's an after effect of vandalism, because they vandalize a pipe. They may not have the technical know-how to refix it. After piercing and getting what they want. My view is that there should be more precautionary measures, in terms of security of those pipelines, because they are well located for people to appreciate where they are. And that's why these two lumps keep attacking these lines. And I don't know, because it's not up to 3 or 4 months ago that we had a similar issue in Lagos. So why has it repeated itself this time around? So it's becoming a worrisome situation, for not just Lagos State, but for Nigerians, who reside in Lagos.
Well, there is instances of pipe vandalization. There are instances of also gas sales in residential areas. Now, until the investigation that the Lagos State government has set up, the panel, comes out with actually what were the indices that led to this last explosion, we will be talking in the area of speculation. But the pointers are to the fact that it's a combination of gas and petroleum pipeline. All of them are incendiary, inflammable content that actually led to this conflagration.
On the face of it, because if you take a look at the level of development in that area, I mean, it's not a hidden area, it's a built-up area. You can, on the face of it, without prejudice to what the inquiry will reveal, you can virtually eliminate pipeline vandalism. And the cause, being the accident of a truck ramming into gas cylinders at a gas sales outlet, which then ignited. But which then may also speak to, again, I mean, you can begin to escalate what the other causes are. Was it a surface pipeline, or was a pipeline at the pipeline on its own ruptured, on account of age or otherwise? These are the things to look at. But it's pretty sad. Bayo, we discussed this yesterday on the program. We can't continue to be having obituary notices arising from. And these things are happening in urban areas. I mean, it's unacceptable.
I think it's a factor of failure of our urban planning. Most often than not, rather than make provision for utility services and safe way for incendiary products like gas and petroleum products, people tend to build indiscriminately anywhere. We have the tendency to build before we even think about the rules for the area. Therefore, buildings will spring up, then we start thinking of rules to maneuver within the spaces between buildings. And that is what is causing all this.
Urban planning, I think, is part of it.
Yes, it's a big challenge.
You find people who are selling gas cylinders inside the high-density areas in the cities. Even some streets that people know is a street where, there are, events and activities, or even human movement. You'll find the gas cylinder shops around the area. And if anything happens, of course, well, nobody prays for that. But if it happens, then the Lagos saga will be repeated. So, as a matter of fact, it's about security, it's about planning, urban planning, because some cities in this country actually are not properly planned with respect to who does what when? Where are residential areas? Where are the business areas? Where can you now do business? That has to do with gas or petrol. In fact, petrol stations are now on the streets. Petrol stations are built on the streets, and I wonder why. You see residential areas. You just see one petrol station sandwiched between two residential areas. You see a filling station there.
Precisely.
Now let's go into the development in the All Progressive Congress.
Yeah, I'm sorry, before we leave this, there's another point to make. I'm sure urban planners will also worry about this, but it has more to do with the utility infrastructure that we have in the country. Gas pipelines were laid in Lagos, some years ago, to supply gas to big factories where they could now generate their own power. There were signs planted along the route of the gas pipelines. I remember when these things were being laid, indicating, oh, this is a gas pipeline. But over time, some of those signs have themselves been accidented and virtually taken away. So tomorrow you say, fine, we want to have street lights again on this particular axis. Are you with me? The contractor comes. The contractor probably has no indication as to what is underneath.
Subsurface.
Namely gas pipelines. So they come with, typically we come with diggers and all kinds of things, and then before you know it,
you have. Well, I was talking about what the Court of Appeal ruled yesterday. It's granted a stay of execution. You go on the decision by Justice Danlami Senchi, which through an interlocutory injunction restrained Comrade Adams Oshiomhole for acting as chairman of the All Progressive Congress. The three justices, led by Justice Abubakar Deti Yahaya, advised politicians and political parties to endeavor to solve their problems internally before running to the court. And it will also surprise you. At a federal high court sitting at Maitama, Justice Samira Bature also granted an interlocutory order allowing the acting secretary of the All Progressive Congress to continue as acting chairman pending the outcome. I suppose now that with the decision of the Court of Appeal being a superior court, it will overtake that. Yeah. But politicians need to be very careful. You recall that just in the last 2 weeks, there was first the interlocutory order from the Justice Senchi in Jabi, and the week later, there was another interim order from a federal high court in Kano restraining the APC as far back as in the Esako local government area where Comrade Adams Oshiomhole comes from. And the advice from the Court of Appeal is very instructive. Apparently, politicians are clogging the courts with some of these cases which are very, very unnecessary.
Exactly, very unnecessary. And
sometimes an undue abuse of court processes.
Exactly, because even the court in Kano, which has a equal jurisdiction with that of the court in Abuja, to have come up with a decision that's at variance, with the court decision in Abuja, that worried, many of us and lawyers as to high court. Is there any difference in terms of jurisdiction over an issue and the ruling against each other? To us, I don't think it's right. I don't think it's right.
Well, I mean, the matters will continue to go on. But just one reminder to us. I mean, Bayo and Kyria, we were all around during the Second Republic, from 1979 until that republic collapsed on the 31st of December 1983.
Yes.
Did we see this kind of behavior amongst political parties or operators of political parties? I mean, there were 6 political parties there. I mean, we took the 5 major ones and the Nigeria Advanced Party by Tunji Braithwaite. Were we seeing these kinds of things? I mean, let's face it. I mean, yes, you consider that our democracy is growing, our electoral jurisprudence is also growing.
It cannot be growing when we are not, putting our acts together.
No, Kyria, I'm just saying, that could be the alibi. To say this is growing, you are expanding. To be honest with you, even as a lawyer, you have difficulty just making sense of the cases and the decisions that are being given, particularly with regard to the management of political parties and internal democracy in the political parties. There's no exception. PDP, when they were in power, it was the same issue. I mean, at some point before the former governor, of Borno left his seat as the chairman of the PDP, nobody knew what PDP was like. It had become like an amoeba. And here you are, one tension here, another tension there. And in the meantime, on account of the structure of the parties, executive time is being burnt, on just solving internal party issues.
In fact, you are comparing it to the Second Republic. At that time, you can discern some element of ideology from the political parties.
The differences in ideologies.
Can you find that now?
No.
What we have now are Siamese twins as far as these political parties are concerned, and there seem to be no ideological or principled direction. It's just that they get ourselves together and get into power. When we get into power, then we think of how
People
to go
get
about
to
it.
where the pendulum swings to,
The other story of concern is about COVID virus and how it is impacting on all economies of the world, and Nigeria not inclusive. The Honorable Minister for Finance, Budget and National Planning has indicated that the 22.7 billion loan will now probably have to be put on hold because Nigeria will now have to, although it has been approved by the National Assembly, it is a ticket that has been given to the National Assembly by the Senate. The House of Representatives is already for dragging on it, but the minister has given indication that even when it is approved, Nigeria will likely look for the right time before it will implement and go into the loan market.
Because coronavirus has indeed devastated the world economically. Just as yesterday, the American airlines are demanding $50 billion bailout from the government. All the EU has come out openly now to close down their borders. That was announced yesterday, and so on. And all businesses are on hold. In America, people are buying as if there is no tomorrow. Stocking their homes with all the required groceries and what have you. So the idea is that it's a ripple effect of this coronavirus that will eventually affect all countries across the globe economically, including Nigeria.
Yes, and Nigeria, we are lucky for now, but we should not rest on our oars because as at the last count, the World Health Organization has identified we have the sad case of a Nigerian doctor who has died from coronavirus in Faraway in Canada. But the fact remains that we must not rest on our oars. And that is why it is very instructive. Yesterday, the Honorable Minister of State for Health raised the alarm that apart from the 5 endemic countries that were identified, 3 others have now been added. That is Spain, Germany, and France. And passengers coming from these endemic countries will be subjected to special isolation.
The countries you mentioned now have closed down their borders as yesterday. Yes. They have closed down their borders. These 3 countries you mentioned now.
Well, Benin Republic has reported a case of coronavirus. That's next door. So we also have to be watchful in terms of our borders.
Yes.
South Africa has prohibited persons from heavily impacted coronavirus countries from admission into South Africa. Kenya has taken the same step. Ghana has also taken the same step. Canada, of course, has closed its borders to all, with the exception of the United States. There are a number of lessons to learn from this. You can see what this coronavirus has brought. Yesterday we were discussing the impact of coronavirus on foreign relations, significant perspectives that our guests brought. But, for us, when these are lessons, as I said, for us to learn, that this is a time for you to begin to look inwards. We cannot run away from seeking to develop our country. We cannot run away. Every time, little time, somebody said, "No, I'm going abroad." Go abroad now.
And how many people are going abroad now?
No, but they won't allow you to come. Anywhere. That's the point. Yeah. I mean, the fact that Nigeria has just one index case. But they look, we don't want any entry.
And the competition for the few goods would engender inflation. Inflation, until recently, had been progressively declining over the past 3 to 4 years. It started from about 13% and was declining up to about 9.8% before it now started climbing up to about 12.8%. It means that we need to look at the impetuses we've put in place that have succeeded in checking inflation. Otherwise, with the challenges we are having now, coronavirus adding more salt to the injury of the economic challenges, the tendency is that inflation will also go up. It means we must put all our hands on deck to fight inflation.
Okay, Bayo Achebe, thank you for being around. We'll see you again tomorrow.
Thank you too.
All right, it's Good Morning Nigeria, live on the network service of the NTA. We're taking a short break now. When we return, we're talking about the prolonged delays in supplying electricity meters.
Nigeria is our country, and it's the only country we have. Irrespective of religion, tribe, the heroes of our past did their best to take Nigeria to where it is today. It will be unfortunate, I repeat, unfortunate, absolutely, if we don't keep Nigeria intact. We must put our differences behind. We must let everybody know that human beings cannot live together without some differences. But at the end of the day, our country is Nigerian. It must always come first.
Get ready for the Unity Challenge reality TV show. Coming soon.
Engineering skills and technology define the quality of television transmission output. Training and retraining of appropriate personnel on the management of modern equipment is therefore a key competition strategy in the dynamic television industry. NTA TV College, Jos, invites relevant desk officers to special engineering courses as follows. 1-week course on audio engineering, operations and maintenance. Date 20th to 24th April 2020. 1-week intensive course on electrical power, earthing, lighting, uninterrupted power supply UPS, inverter and solar system. Date 1st to 5th June 2020. 1-week intensive course on studio broadcast equipment and outside broadcast operation. Date 15th to 19th June 2020. 1-week course on new technologies, optical fiber, IP technologies, automation storage and wireless technology. Date 10th to 14th August 2020. The venue for all courses is NTA Television College, near Old Government House, Rayfield, Jos. Course fee 40,000 naira per participant. Accommodation inclusive. For more inquiries, please call 0803-314-4383 or 0806-980-9807. NTA TV College, Jos. Training you to be the best you want to be.
Cadbury Hot Chocolate 3-in-1, a delicious combination of rich cocoa and wholesome goodness of milk. Just add hot water to get an instant chocolatey treat. Cadbury Hot Chocolate 3-in-1. Just add hot water.
Available in stores at 18 naira.
Some of the girls were having difficulties in their academics, and they now decided to ask us to help out. And we've decided to teach them other things, other skills. To invest in a woman is really to invest in a nation, because the women really are the heart of the family.
Touching lives.
We thank you for staying with us. As a prompt for our conversation, Aisha Ubali brings us this background report.
The history of electricity metering in Nigeria is as old as the history of electricity development in the country. The production and delivery of electricity to consumers on a commercial basis began as far back as 1896. Electricity generation and distribution were largely decentralized until 1951, when the Electricity Corporation of Nigeria (ECN) was established as a central body responsible for electricity supply. The National Electricity Power Authority then carried out its primary functions of generation, transmission, distribution, and marketing of electricity in Nigeria. This persisted until 2006, when NEPA was unbundled into 18 companies in line with the Power Sector Reform Program of the Federal Government of Nigeria. The implementation of Power Sector Reform Act of 2005 and the unbundling of PHCN involved the process of procurement and deployment of metering systems. However, some form of autonomy has been achieved, as the distribution companies can now procure and install meters independently. The innovation was to check issues of overbilling and other related matters. Customers were, however, happy since the introduction of the prepayment metering system. Ironically, this development has its own challenges. Since the innovation, observers believe the absence of competent local meter manufacturers was considered a critical element that accounted for the delay in meter procurement.
Nobody gave it to me. I asked for the prepaid meter, and they are requesting for money from me. So I should pay, 35,000 naira before they will give me prepay.
Before now, there used to be a way that they get the money out from what people are paying. You know, from the service, they get it in the form of those service charges they get. But now, you're asking somebody to come and pay 25,000 naira to get the meter. No, it's bad.
35,000, 50 something like that naira till today. I've not seen it.
I have a prepaid meter, and recently I was given a bill, an estimated billing of about 43,000 naira.
Well, we've applied, and I think the few times we've gone to the office when we applied, they did respond. They told us, come today, come tomorrow, which we did.
So the thing is just so discouraging. Some of us don't even make effort to go. Because people that have tried before, we have not seen them with it.
While many are anticipating a quick resolution to the challenge, the solution from all indications lies in proactive measures by stakeholders in the industry.
All right, thank you very much, Aisha Obali, for that backgrounder. We have guests here in our Abuja studios as well as at our Lagos Network Center. Let's begin by introducing our two guests in Lagos. First, we'd like to welcome the Chief Executive Officer of New Hampshire Capital Limited, manufacturers of prepaid electricity meters. Odion Omofoma is one of our guests in the studios. Can we see them on the screen right now?
Good morning, Nigeria. Thank you for having me.
Okay, that's Odion Omofoma of New Hampshire. Then we also have with him in the studios there the company secretary of MOMAS, the manufacturers of prepaid electricity meters as well. Yahaya, Double Yahaya, pleasure to have you with us on Good Morning Nigeria.
Good morning, Nigeria. Good morning from Lagos.
Pleasure. Yeah, it's indeed nice to have both of you who are involved in the manufacture of meters, because we're hoping to have facts, Kingsley, today from them.
That's right.
And back here in Abuja, we also have a guest, the National President, Association of Public Policy Analysts and Power Sector Activists, Prince Will Okuria. Prince Will, it's good to have you again on this platform.
Thank you, Nigeria.
And we also have Jerry Bayom, I hope I got that correctly, electricity consumer, Abuja. You're welcome. You are representing us. You're welcome.
Yes, thank you.
All right.
Good morning, Nigeria.
Okay, just as well, let's begin this conversation with the producers of electricity meters in Lagos, Odion Omofoma, who is CEO of New Hampshire. Odion, now give us a sense of what is happening. Part of the data that we have indicates that in terms of enumeration, there are some 10 million or so electricity consumers who've been taken on in the register, and only about 4.8 million of those consumers have access to meters. Another 5.2 million are still struggling to have their meters, and they are at the receiving end of the usually contentious estimated billing. Now, what is the challenge with producing and delivering meters to discos and onward to electricity consumers?
Thank you again, Victor. So let me quickly make a correction. New Hampshire Capital, we are an energy and financial advisory company. We're also a meter asset provider, rolling out 400,000 meters over the next 2 years for 2 electricity discos in the southwest. So we're not a meter manufacturer. But however, to speak to your question, the MAP regulations, meter asset provider regulations, was supposed to block or close the metering gap. Like you said, 10 million customers, over 50% of those customers don't have meters. And the ones that have meters, you have a lot of them obsolete meters that were installed by ECN and then NEPA. So those meters are actually outdated and they need to be replaced. Now, the challenge with metering has always been about financing. The reality is that prepaid meters are a bit of the network that requires funding, and that's why the MAP regulations was done to allow third-party investors like New Hampshire Capital come in with their financing, finance the meters, install and roll out. Since the implementation of the MAP regulations, we've experienced several challenges that are put into 4 buckets. The first is the first bucket of challenge is the regulatory challenge. I'll speak to that very soon. The second, fiscal challenges that we have. The third, technical challenges, and then the fourth, the traditional challenges that you would have or you would anticipate going into such a massive rollout of meters. In terms of the regulatory challenge, you've had an issue where the regulator, in its wisdom, has fixed or capped the price of meters across the country. So the meters cost the same whether in Lagos or in Sokoto or in Yola. However, the cost of installing these meters actually vary from these locations, primarily due to logistics. But that's one bit of the puzzle. The other bit is that MAPs are supposed to bring in their financing to finance these meters, and customers who can pay will pay over a period of time. So the MAP is a financing scheme for the sector. So the cost of capital is also a critical issue there that needs to be considered. The second bit of it is the fiscal challenges that we have, and one primary issue that has distorted the rollout has been the increment of the duties on prepaid meters. It moved from 10% to 45%. That's a 250% increase. Now, let me say this. Every single meter in this country is imported, both the meters that are fully assembled and the meters that are, assembled locally. Meter manufacturing, at best, is meter assembly, where components are put together and then rolled out. There's also value creation here. That's not so, but the most important thing is that these meters are subjected to import duties, and we've seen that to the 250% markup. The third part of it is the high cost of financing. We also have issues in terms of the availability of long-term funding. Now, that said, if there's financing, long-term financing in the sector, right, we see a lot of MAPs closing out these metering gaps in the next 2 years. It's a play on financing. Once you get that right, meters will come out as easily as is anticipated by the regulation.
All right, thank you. Let's go to the company secretary, Momas. Let's get your view, if you could, of the genesis of the metering deficits that we are talking about. Do you also believe that there are buckets of issues that are making it particularly impossible for a greater number of electricity consumers to have access to prepaid meters?
Thank you very much. Just like my colleague, Mr. Odion, said here, there are a lot of issues that plague the meter asset provider regulation. But in essence, it's that it's a new regulation, it's a policy, and the regulator has introduced it to test the market, particularly to close the metering gap. At Momas MEMCOR, we're actually meter manufacturers. For me, particularly, one thing that resonates is that the regulator had actually capped the sale of electricity meters of the DISCO at about 37,000 and 67,000 naira. But what you have found is that the DISCOs, on the other hand, and it remains the mandate of the distributions company, according to Section 32 and 76 of the Power Sector Reform Act, to actually meter its customers. So you find the DISCOs giving a certain specification of meters that is going to meet their peculiar challenges on their distribution network and franchise. So we have a situation whereby, to put it metaphorically, the regulator has capped the sale of meter for the price of a Toyota, and the distribution companies have asked for a Mercedes. This is very difficult for businessmen to be able to meet the expectations of the distribution companies at the very stifled price of the regulator. But other than that, there's the issue of the logistics as well, which is the cost of installation and deployment of this meter is an all-inclusive cost. So the 37,000 and the 67,000 is an all-inclusive cost. Now, where we're coming from, that the cost of mobilizing manpower in Lagos is different from the cost of mobilizing manpower in Yola or in a remote place like maybe Kotonkarifi or all the small villages. So these are some of the challenges. And we've also attended some stakeholder engagements meeting where we've seen other maps come, and many of them have complained about the strain and the difficulty of being able to attract financing. Particularly financing to be able to do business with the cost of high interest rates, borrowing from the Nigerian commercial market. Just quite recently as well, there's been a very high import rate, about 40% at the ports before you can bring in electricity meters. But I think that also speaks to one end, that perhaps we should look inwards, and most of the meter asset providers perhaps should speak to meter manufacturing capacity, because at the moment, for example, we have an installed capacity of about 30 million meters on one shift daily. So in a year, we're able to roll out hundreds and hundreds of meters. So within the time specified by NERC, as a single entity, we're able to close the metering gap. So it's our challenges exist, but we shouldn't overflock them. It's a new policy that has been introduced by NERC. Of course, there will be some bottlenecks. It won't be smooth sailing, but together we must continue to respond with enabling policies that will make sure that the implementation comes alive.
Well, gentlemen, I want to stay with you still in Lagos, and I would like you to clarify the point made by Odion Omofoma. He says that there are no meter manufacturers in Nigeria, and that the best we have is meter assembly. Clarify that in the first instance. And second point will also be about how many meter assembly plants or meter manufacturing plants do we have in Nigeria today? In aggregate, how many meters get rolled off the assembly line or their manufacturing line each year?
Okay, thank you very much. I was hoping I will be able to give some clarification. You know, manufacturing actually has stages, and to mirror what my brother, Mr. Odion, said, I think when he met assembly, he was talking about SKD, which is whereby you find a situation whereby people import different components and then they assemble them in their manufactory, in their factory. For us at Momos, it's a little different. We actually are original equipment manufacturers. So the software and hardware is proudly Nigerian by Nigerians. We're one of the few countries in Africa whereby we do not have a single expatriate in our employment. And we have been able to manufacture electricity meters which have been accepted by Power internationally. So I must say with all humility that we are original equipment manufacturers at MEMQual, and there is an active capacity to be able to close the metering gap. There are also other electricity meter manufacturers. Many are assemblers. I think others are also working on their original equipment solutions. I think give or take we have about 3 or 4 that I am aware of. Although there are others, very little units, which should also be encouraged, because it's those little units, just like in China, it's those little units that grew up to be multinational companies that send meters across the world now. So we do have an active and installed capacity of manufacturers in Nigeria. We do.
All right, thank you for that clarification. I'm with you because I respect Nigerians who are involved in local manufacture, because that's the only way forward. And in this connection, we're talking about meters. I used to think that, look, if it's not imported, then we were in trouble. Let's return to Odion in Lagos. Odion, you pointed some factors that are militating against closing the metering deficit in Nigeria. You talked about regulatory challenge. So we talked about funding, also traditional challenge, as you put it. Now, when we talk about 36,000 naira for perhaps a one-phase meter and 67,000 naira, I can assure you that in the 2 places that I live, in Abuja and Enugu, I have my prepaid meters and I paid for it. Now, when you talk about funding, the Nigerians seem to be prepared to pay for these meters if they get to them. And when you raise funding as an issue, one begins to wonder what should be the responsibility of DisCos. And why is it becoming impossible for people to have access? And now we have heard from Yahaya that they can do it, they can close the gap. So what's your take?
I think the issue about the MAP regulations is to pretty much introduce third parties to provide funding into the market. Investors to come in and invest in the metering space. That is actually the core of the regulation. Now, the regulation has a situation where people can pay upfront for their meters, right? And then people who can't pay are allowed to pay over an instrumental period, over 10 years. Now, that makes it flexible for people to decide what the capacity can do. It's also important to state that the MAP regulations is not unique to Nigeria. That's the way the metering sector globally is going. It's already implemented in the UK and Australia as well, where third parties come in and fund the metering gap. Now, the issue about funding is not so much about people being able to pay for the meters. It's about the capital, the cost that the regulators fix for the meters being sufficient to cover the cost of actually getting the meters to consumers, right? So that's actually the core of the funding issue. So if you're going to bring the true cost of metering, put it out there plain and for people to look at, then it's important that investors should be able to realize the investments that they put into the sector. I also would like to say that there's actually, I'm a believer in buy Nigeria to grow Nigeria. So we actually seen a lot of MAPs now start to look at the manufacturing or assembly side of things. Hopefully that will bring down the cost of metering as we see, as time goes on. And the last point I'd like to say is that the MAP isn't a failed regulation by any standard. It is just starting. MAPs have 3 years to close the metering gap. We're talking about 6-7 million meters that have to be rolled out over a 2-3 year period. And it's just the start of it. And once we get past these teething issues in terms of fiscal policies where levies, duty payments are jacked up without recourse to what is obtainable, I think we will see a lot of rollouts. As we speak, there are close to 300,000 meters trapped at the port. The port congestion is a big issue where meters have been trapped since November. Some maps can't clear their meters. So those are the things, those are the fiscal issues that we must look at so that we can get meters across as fast as possible. Thank you very much.
All right, Odion, thanks a lot. You were talking about closing the metering gap. To say the next 3 years you can roll out about 6 million or so, which will now be excess. But don't forget, new houses are being built. You're having new persons or young persons who are moving into their own homes, and so the demand is going to be expanded. It's as if the current enumeration figure of about 10 million is static. Of course, assuming the enumeration was comprehensive in the past, you will, of course, will expect some growth over the next 2-3 years. But your points are noted, and we'll return to you, gentlemen, subsequently in Lagos. Prince Will Okore, you've listened to those who are involved in the meter assets provision scheme, but what's your reaction to their explanation?
Honestly, I get worried. The way issues revolving around the privatization of the power sector are being handled does not really prove that our country is serious in this sector. Sorry, I might sound like being pessimistic. But if you look at it, even the 10 million meters you're talking about, or 6 million meters you're talking about, how many households? A country with almost 180 million persons, the households in Nigeria is not less than 36 million, or even 50 million. And then you're talking about 10 million meters. How many houses will have this meter? Now, if you look at it again, the meter issues we are talking about here is a sabotage of the privatization policy in the power sector. Because if you look at it, it's even a challenge to the anti-corruption policy of this government. Because meters, in fact, before any company would have gone into any activity in the electricity sector in this nation, the first thing would have been provision of meters. Because it is with the meter transparency, the principles of good governance. You talk about transparency, accountability, participation. Now, how will the consumer be sure that the money is being charged is what it is? Now, the enumeration on its own is faulty. 2, the people that are, this is not the first time. There was CAPME. Remember CAPME came on the other time? And I remember that when CAPME was implemented, it wasn't implemented in the whole of Southeast. It was not implemented. That CAPME was, you pay for the meter, and they say they'll be taking back the money from the bills you are paying. What made it fail? Now, has there been a review of what led to the failure of CAPME before MAP is brought on board? Now, is there a consultation with the consumers who are using these things? Is there consultation with the state and local governments? I'm not excited when certain policies are mentioned by NEC. In fact, I wonder why NEC is not in this setting. NEC should come and answer certain things. Because for it, you have 774 local government councils in this country. You have 36 states. And you're talking about 10 million meters. One state has about 4 to 5 million persons. And the houses in one state is not less than 3 million or 2 million. And then if you times it by 36, even if the houses in states are 2 million houses, times it by 36. And you are telling Nigerians that you're looking at producing 10 million or 6 million meters in a space of 2 years. How that means estimated billing will continue. Who even monitors this? Under CAPME, people paid. They couldn't get the meters. You will pay and wait and wait and wait. The meter wouldn't come. Now, the estimation, you find out that almost 85%, or even if not 90% of consumers are living on estimated billing. And you know that this is the only way you can track the distribution companies when they make claims of inadequate tariff. Because if you can have enumeration of the actual consumers that are metered, and you know how much they are paying, you will understand what is happening. Now look at the issue of financing he's complaining about. Look at all the money that federal government has put into these discos. What stops the CBN making meter production and a subhead for financing? And then this will be manufactured in Nigeria. What stops NEMSA, that is in charge of this metering, from having a national conference on metering and then get the consumers to come and say their views? Because these prices you are fixing, NEC is fixing prices without consultation with the consumers. Now, when you fix this price now, we need to look at, with 37 naira or whatever, 37,000, how many Nigerian consumers can pay? The vulnerable groups, remember that even in other countries, there are vulnerable consumers who are not even charged. But here now, even the vulnerable and non-vulnerable are paying. How many persons will be able to pay? What is the average salary of a civil servant who is living in a home? If he removes 37 or 36,000 to buy meter, and this meter is not his property. This meter is supposed to be the property of the distribution company. And there was a performance agreement signed at the initial stage when these distribution companies took over. But the question we need to ask is there no need to enforce the laws guiding this sector? Is this sector one sector that there is no law and nobody can enforce the law? Is it a sector that the governors of the states do not seem to feel they have responsibility over their citizens, who are these consumers? Is it something that the local government council chairmen don't have responsibility over their citizens? Whereas we are still told that security and welfare of the citizen is the primary purpose of government. Now, with what is happening now, how can the citizens be productive? And then when you are talking about anti-corruption, and organizations that have been given license to operate in the country are evading everything that will bring about transparency and accountability. Meters are the only source of transparency and accountability in that sector. Because with it, you don't know what you are paying for.
All right. We'll return to you in due course. In fact, what played out, Kingsley, in the southeast of Nigeria shortly before or after Christmas was the planned recall of all meters because they said that most of them have expired. That you pay little and it will take you in a longer period of time. But what also happened was that there were no meters to replace the ones you are recalling. And now they say, look, if you pay, you wait for up to 3 or 4 months, or even more than that. Now, in the interim, you are paying estimated billing. So how is it going to... So the consumers reacted, and as rightly pointed out, it was also shocking to me that the government in the Southeast did not react to that. There was no act. They didn't react to that because their subjects are the consumers of these products that we're talking about. Now, Jerry Mbayam, you are representing the consumers. You listened to our guests in Lagos, and of course, Armando Okorie here. What is the position of consumers?
Well, as a consumer, we need a quality power. Quality power either in our factories, quality power in our homes. Why I said quality power is that if they don't give you the required voltage and the frequency, you end up using certain gadgets in order to be able to boost the voltages. And that will add to your cost. Secondly, you discover that even in most of these consumer that we are at home, they give us a lot of this estimated billing. And estimated billing are done in such a way that it is exploitative to the consumer. The consumer, in a short, is being exploited. NEC is not even working to the advantage of the consumer. There is no transparency in the power sector. Take, for instance, I was on an estimated billing. I pay 5,000 naira per month. You will not be given a notice. And an instant was, we left for work on a Friday morning, and a bill was brought. On Monday morning, when we left for work, before we came back, our electricity was cut. We are not entitled to notice. We are not entitled to, what time will you pay these bills? Also, I have discovered that even the estimated bills is daylight robbery. Why? I just purchased a meter on the 28th, on the 23rd of December. I discovered that by the 20 units in it was able to take care of January. On the 28th of January, that 20 unit expired. I now had to vent for 5,000 naira. As I speak to you now, the whole of February, I'm now in March, I have only consumed 60 units.
That's a single phase meter?
It's a single phase meter. I've only consumed 60 units. Imagine, I used to pay, that means virtually in a month, I consume just about 40. Because at the end of February, I just consume about 40 units. And 40 units, if you are to multiply, you are to convert it, it's just about 1,000 naira. Now NEC came up and said an unmetered consumer should pay 1,800. That converts to close to about 78 units. That still, to me, is far above what some of our consumers, estimated consumers, are consuming. So, to us, estimated billing is not the way to go because there is no transparency. We want to pay for the meter. As far as consumers are concerned, bring out the meter, we are ready to pay. So that they install it for us. If there is no power in the system, fine, we stay. When there is power in the system, we consume the power. That is our take.
Sorry. All right, Jerry, thanks a lot. Let's return to Lagos. Yahaya and Odion Omonfoma. Omonfoma, you earlier indicated the bouquet of challenges that the meter providers face: regulatory, fiscal, cost of capital, and technical. I just want us to probably just reduce this for our own understanding. Some of our viewers. I recall that in the early 70s, the military government of the then Midwestern states, headed by Brigadier Samuel Osaibovo Bemude of blessed memory, rolled out what was called the Rural Electrification Scheme. And then you had an ROEB, that is Rural Electricity Board. And in rural areas where electricity was being provided, the houses in those areas that were out of the city were provided with meters. And these meters, you had to feed in a coin. At that time, if you know, 1 kobo was very valuable. 3 pence was also very valuable. Or 3 kobo, or 10 kobo, or 25 kobo was a lot of money. It was called the dollar coin then. And there were no complaints. If the power came 12 hours a day and you fed your own meter, you have light. If you didn't feed your own meter, you would not have light. Why is it that 40, almost 50 years later, we are still just grappling with the issue of providing meters as though we are looking for nuclear warheads, or to use the analogy of Yahaya, it's as if you want to supply a Mercedes-Benz, to electricity consumers. What is the problem? Why can't we overcome some of these issues despite the challenges that you have indicated?
Victor, interestingly, my father worked for the RAB in the 70s, so it's interesting you mention it. But let's in the days of the RAB, metering basically was providing electricity and metering services, the duty of the ECN or NEPA as it then evolved. And then that was backed by budgetary allocations that was sufficient enough to fund these assets. You talked about the late Ogbemudia having to fund meters using the state budget as well through the REB. What has happened now is that meters have evolved, and also the cost of providing electricity has also evolved into a much more transparent process where people should know what they consume. The challenge we're having today with metering is that over time, since the days of Brigadier Ogbemudia, nobody has really invested in metering, such that the metering gap actually grew. There was a time in the late 2007s, where the federal government came up with the national prepaid meter scheme, and that literally flopped. CAPME came on board again, and then CAPME pretty much was badly managed by the parties that should manage it. The other thing to talk about is that metering technology has changed. So in the days of Sam Ogbemudia, you had very analog meters. Interestingly, some of those meters are still on the network. I don't know if they are still reliable, but they are still on the network. Clearly, anybody that has those meters on your network will need to change those meters at some point in time because you're losing energy. But now you now have advanced metering systems that have software. Yahya talked about MoMA's developing a Nigerian software. That is capital cost that at that point in time didn't really exist. The third part is the fact that what is the exchange rate? So those meters were not made in Nigeria. They were imported. But guess what? The Naira was stronger. Today, we have a Naira that exchanges for $1 at almost 370. So those are the things that have made metering look like you're searching for nuclear issues. But the biggest challenge is the fact that we had a metering gap prior to privatization. Having done privatization, we've had a situation whereby the cost of metering was not properly factored into the tariff. That is actually what the MAP regulation is supposed to do. Remove metering as an element of the tariff, make metering cost transparent, and then pass it to the customers who actually pay for everything anyway. But this time around, it's a lot more transparent. So I think it's important that we give this time. Let me just quickly mention something. The consumer advocate talked about not being able to have certain Nigerians not being able to afford meters. That's the unique thing about the MAP regulation. The MAP regulation allows for those who can pay upfront for their meters to pay. You want meters today, pay. However, it will take you time, 10 working days to get it, subject to meters being in the warehouse. And then for the customers who cannot pay, they have up to 10 years to spread out their payment, and they pay an interest rate over time. So the MAP regulations takes care of both classes of customers, those who can pay and those who can't pay. But the most important thing is that the MAP itself, pretty much brings up the capital upfront to bring the meters from MoMA's or from China or wherever is getting the meters, put it in the warehouse so that when you pay, the meters are rolled out. It is that logistics end that we're currently having a bit of constraint. And once we solve that constraint on the logistics, meters will roll out as and when they should roll out.
Okay, well, you people went memory lane, to bring up about what meter was like in the 70s and thereabout. And you call it analog, yes, and I'm happy you say you still see it on the internet. That's showing that the analog nature of it does not make it dysfunctional. But what you need to do is, because technology is progressive, you develop new concepts by every other day, and you can make progress with that. And I'm so glad to know that in Nigeria, meter is produced. And I want to talk to to yeah, once again. Yeah. What is the relationship between your company and Discos? Are you talking with them? Are they engaging you as a local manufacturer when it comes to the issue of supply of meters? Are they complaining? Because, of course, this funding, which has become a very thematic area that has a foot to go. Everybody talks about funding. NEC talks about funding, and Disco the same thing, and what have you. And the thing has actually, made the entire process, look as if it's not serious, according to Otto Korea told us a short while ago. So how are you relating with the Discos? Are they engaging you? Are you doing business with them? Are they requesting for your product, to be circulated in Nigeria? And if they do, and perhaps it's not working, what are the reasons for that?
Okay, thank you very much for that. Let me borrow the language of the judiciary, which is that align with the submissions of my learned brother, Mr. Odion. Just to add to that, before I come to your question, is that, see, the issues, the power sector is a very sensitive issue, and it will continue to be until the average consumer is able to switch on their switch and then they have bulb. Whatever rhetorics, whatever efforts that are being made in the background, or whatever the challenges are, it will never be enough. It will never be enough justification until the average Nigerian is able to switch on their light at every single time and get uninterrupted, stable, and quality power supply. But what we have is that we are going through a teething period, and the challenges in the sector are reducing because the regulator and market participants are introducing new policies. With the analog meter that you mentioned that should be deployed, it's things, the sophistication of the electricity market has really changed. We're not dealing with where the distribution companies now rely so much on their data. We're working with a lot of smart metering systems. We have, right now, we don't use coins. We have vending management systems. We have aggregators. We have banks that are involved. Tokens are generated. There are vendors that sell it. So all of this has to be married. And in the course of consummating this marriage, we meet a lot of challenges which industry stakeholders and the regulators continue to prefer innovative challenges that meet the peculiarity of these challenges. It's never going to be a quick fix. If you're traveling from Lagos to Maiduguri, I think by the time you get to Abuja, we have recorded a milestone. So I think gradually we are going to get there. And I can assure you that the regulator is committed. And many policies that the regulators make sometimes are misinterpreted. There is nothing you can do that is perfect. But what it is that you can always offer a solution, a proposition of a solution that meets a peculiar challenge that we are seeing at the very moment. The 1,800 cap on estimated billing was so as to discourage the distribution companies from using the old methodology of calculating the tariff and just giving people any estimated bill that they want. If you have to go to a 5-bedroom duplex, for example, which is classified under R2, it's a residential development, and you are charging them for 1,800 naira a month, the distribution company is obviously losing. I don't speak for them, but the incentive there that the regulator, I believe the rationale for the regulator to implement that policy is so that they can facilitate the metering. It might be unfortunate that, okay, somebody else who might live in a 1-bedroom flat might not use as much as that 1,800. But all of this is just so that we can close the metering gap. On our relationship with the distribution companies, we have a good relationship with the distribution companies across the federation. We are actually MAPs, we are participants in some of the discos, but we think it could be better. Because we have an installed capacity of 30,000 meters, which has been, we have never reached full capacity since commissioning of our factory. So I think we have the capacity to do more. I think we have the competence to do more. And then lastly, I want to touch on a very sensitive issue, which is about financing and customers being able and ready to pay for the electricity meters. The issue is not in the customer being able and ready to pay for the electricity meters. The thing is that those meters must be sitting in a warehouse. Let me put it simply. They must be sitting in a warehouse for you to come and then say, I want to buy meter, and then in the next 7 days there's a meter on your wall. It is because somebody has already covered the cost for mobilizing and importing about 50,000 or 100,000 meters sitting in a factory. Now the businessmen or the meter asset providers who are supposed to import those meters static on ground, for you to just be able to just go, wake up in the morning, I need meter, and you get meter in the next 7 days, has been unable to mobilize the capital for 100,000 meters because of the expensive, or should I say stringent or inavailability of capital to mobilize that type of resources. So these are some of the challenges that we are facing. Although we have seen, we have approached some maps. For us, I think we are able to manufacture meters at our cost, and we are okay with our financing. But what you have is that whoever will come to us as a manufacturer has to pay for these meters. So there is also need for some sort of intervention, which will have some sort of ripple effect for the consumer. Because if you continue to drop it on the lap of the meter access provider or the businessman that we've given you the contract, go and find it. But what are the practicalities of doing business in Nigeria, where I've read reports that this is one of the toughest places to do business in the world? So there's a reason, there's need for the government to really and truly implement the ease of doing business, so that the electricity supply can get to the bulb of the average electricity consumer.
Well, thank you very much. Gentlemen, let's take one aspect of the bucket of issues that you have, the fiscal, for instance. On capital, which is another bucket of issues, Prince Will Okorie, with us here in the Abuja studios, has made a suggestion that, look, couldn't the central bank also be persuaded to create, if you like, a special dispensation for meter provisioning? The other suggestion one could also make is that you are in business. You're talking about approaching commercial banks. What about the Bank of Industry? The Bank of Industry is available. I'm sure you can get, lower interest facilities for your business. But on the fiscal measure, and my question is going to Odion, and then you may also, also respond to this. Now, Odion, earlier you did say that there were some hundreds of thousands of meters lying at the ports on account of congestion. Congestion arising from a number of reasons, but also you touched on the import duty. It's been increased by some 250%. Here is the question to ask: to whom are you guys speaking? Because some time ago, the then Minister of Power, Works and Housing, Babatunde Raji Fashola, did complain at the time they were clearing some equipment relating to the value chain of the power sector, maybe for Transmission Company of Nigeria. They said those imports had been lying at the ports for so many years uncleared. And then, of course, they got cleared, and then they took them, and I think they are installing them. To whom are you speaking now with regard to what is obviously, in your view, an oppressive import duty regime, and the fact that your meters, hundreds of thousands of them, are lying there? To whom are you speaking? Are you making any headway, assuming you are already speaking to some people?
Kingsley, for an excellent question. To the first, with regards to financing, there's been several engagements with the central bank, and it's been led by the regulator itself, NERC. So NERC has been fantastic in engaging with the CBN to see how they can provide some form of concessionary financing to MAPS, so that MAPS can meet the regulated price. Otherwise, they would have to throw up on the price. We understand the CBN is still looking at the proposal sent, and we expect that at some point in time there will be some policy decisions that will be favorable to the industry. That is not to say that MAPS are not looking at their own capital. We have our own capital that we've mobilized, not sufficient for the volume of meters that we have, but we're actually ramping up our installation. But the critical thing is the cost of the capital. So if the CBN can come up with the concessionary funding that is required to allow MAPS rollout, then that would actually help the sector to do a great deal. I mean, the question is putting 600 billion on the generator side or putting 600 billion as some form of assurance to MAPS so that they're able to roll out meters. Either which way, government needs to take a decision, and I think I would like to commend NERC for taking a stance in pushing this agenda. Now, with regards to the fiscal challenges that we have, particularly the duty, the increase in duty, 350%, I think this appeal goes directly to the Minister of Finance because the Nigerian Customs Authority, is under her watch, and it's a fiscal measure that they've put in place, obviously with very good intentions. Good intentions meaning to stimulate local production of meters. But guess what? Local production of meters will take its time. It will take time to get there. Momas has installed capacity, but they still need to bring in certain parts, certain components in. They may have the software, they may have certain things, but there are certain things they will still need to bring in. So all those things are stuck there. So this appeal is pretty much to the Minister of Finance. The fate, and I'll say this without any form of dramatization, the fate of the MAP is in our hands. If we can relax the import duty, at least even for a year, so that people can stabilize, meters can come in, and people who need to import, set up their assembly lines can also have that window to set it up. Because to set up an assembly line, it takes you at least 6 months. There are regulatory issues you must pass, and I mean things like Standard Organization of Nigeria, their processes. So we've been engaging with all stakeholders. We have an association that we've pretty much come together to speak to a number of these issues to make sure the process moves very fast. But I can say this, it is important, it is imperative that the duty payments be looked at to make sure that at least meters that are in the ports and meters that are on their way come in easily. Thank you very much.
All right, you have spoken so well on this, on that particular question. But even look, as things happen in this country, even if you have duty-free, importation of meters and what have you, what is the guarantee that when these meters, are in here, that the consumers are going to get them? Nigeria, we have a way we do business, and they will be hoarded. And we'll be scrambling to get one, and we'll begin to pay for them higher than necessary. Now, it's good that, of course, the CBN or NEC are involved in this and thinking on how to make it possible for us to have some of these meters in the country. It's a good idea, but the workability is also what is in question. And that's why I want to bring in, before we take a break, let's bring in Okorie here once more to, of course, do his own analysis of your submissions.
From what the two gentlemen have said, you can see that we are still returning to an unworkable solution. It will still look like the discos that we are given license. For crying out loud, we are given a license to provide meter. You are now complaining you don't have money. So why did you even go into it in the first place? You are a businessman. You invest your money so that you can recover. And now you are complaining you don't have money. The same way discos we are given license to supply electricity. Today, discos are complaining they don't have money. What about these private independent electricity distribution networks? Go to Lagos. PIPP Vietan in Lagos is an independent electricity distribution network, providing electricity to people under willing buyer, willing seller. They are not complaining about money to supply electricity to people in Lekki. They are not complaining of supplying electricity to Lagos State. The plazas they are supplying electricity to are not complaining. So why will government always create room for a group of people that are not really serious to not take advantage of Nigerians? I'm a Christian. The Bible says if the foundation be destroyed, what can the righteous do? There is no serious investor, knowing the population of Nigeria, that will accept to invest in a business where the structure is deceitful. It is deceitful by the fact that you are telling me it's 10 million meters you want to provide in a country with 180 million persons. And if I'm an investor and I want to invest in this sector, I'm looking at the number of meters I will sell to recover money. For me, investing to come to Nigeria and sell just 5 million meters or 10 million meters is no business. If you tell an investor that you are going to roll out 30 million, 100 million, because we have about 100, we don't have less than 50 million households. And you're talking about 10 million meters in 2 years. Which investor will invest in that? It's deceitful. So what has happened here again is that people have taken advantage of metering again as an opportunity to start frustrating Nigerians and be complaining they don't have money. The question is, what is the National Assembly doing? Who are the owners of this map now? Can we know whom their directors are? Who owns them? Because you see what is happening in this sector is that opportunities are being created for some idle people who have no money to invest and don't have the technical competence. The men that are talking to us here, I believe some of them are economists. Some are financial experts. Are Nigerians fools? You have gotten license to provide meter. You are not coming to tell Nigerians that you don't have money to provide the meter. Money should be given to you. Did you do feasibility study at the first place? To now know how much is the cost of production of 1 meter. So opportunity has been created for some people now to start frustrating Nigerians. In the first place, these discos are not paying GENCOs the way they should pay them. They are owing GENCOs. The GENCOs generated this electricity. The discos don't pay them the money they should pay them. Now, the discos cannot provide meter. You have created opportunity again for some people on that map. And the map is saying they will provide meter if you pay. Now, the meter is not even available. You have to pay. They want to be sure there is money. So what is their investment? Just like the discos now, what is their investment in infrastructure? What is their investment in this sector? So the way this whole thing looks, let Nigerians not be taken for granted. I don't know whether the federal government really listens to what we are discussing here. Because no serious person, be it a foreign investor or local investor, will see this deceitful plot and invest. Because
Prince Will, let's watch it. I mean, it's not. There's no proof that this is a deceitful. Hang on a second. Just hold on a second. It's not. There's no proof that this is a deceitful business plan.
There is proof
on the basis of which the government now brought in the maps, for purposes of bridging the metering gap. We cannot also say for sure that these are idle persons, who've just been granted licenses as part of the value chain of getting electricity. But the points that you have raised otherwise are to be noted, because you've talked about the fact that, look, under privatization, this was what we had. Discos are complaining about funding as part of their challenges. They're not paying the GENCOs. And here you are, okay, they said that, look, we don't have meters. That is a problem for the consumers. Now get in, map, and then see how you can bridge the gap. Meter providers are also having their own complaints. But cost of capital is only one of 4 issues articulated by Odion. I'm sure you remember he mentioned regulatory. He talked about fiscal, which he has explained. I mean, he has made a direct appeal. Just by way of recapitulation, he did say that, fine, the government's intention was noble. Protect the local industry to enable them produce meters and therefore hike the import duty. But at the same time, local capacity is rather limited. So let's have meters coming. Kirian has already indicated that, look, suppose those meters, you have a flood of meters and the hoarding takes place. That could also be another challenge. So it's a potpourri of issues that are there. Jerry, would like you to come in now, unless we're having a short break. Otherwise, we'd like to bring in Jerry now so that you have we'll have your own views on this.
Our views as consumers is clear. We want electricity, but unfortunately, just like I concur with what he just said, it looks like there is some conspiracy going on in the power sector. Why am I saying there's a conspiracy? You discover that the GENCO will say online we are producing about 7 or 8 megawatt of power, 1,000 megawatts of power. And on the other side, the discourse is just saying, if they only have 3,000 megawatts of power, then you start wondering, the discourse will not give you power until at such a time, maybe when they are going to disconnect, you will have power for 5 days non-stop. You start wondering, where are they getting that power within that 5 days that they supply to everybody? It clearly shows that there are some people who have made themselves to frustrate government intention to grow the economy. My take on this is this. If you are a disco, you knew the part you're supposed to play. You are a GENCO, you knew the part you're supposed to play. Then you are the TCN, the transmission company. You know the part you're supposed to play. And if at any point, any of these people are not playing those parts, the regulatory commission, who is like the policeman, should sanction them immediately. What? Do they not have the power? My question is, do they not have the power to sanction any of these agencies? They should have the power. And if they have the power to sanction them, then we will get some sanity in the power sector.
No, all right, thank you very much. Kingsley, there is a lacuna in the entire process.
As you always say,
in the entire process, because that's what has played out, you know. Well, we'll take a short break. When we get back, we'll continue with the conversation. Do stay with us.
My name is Yemi Adetunji, the COO downstream of NNPC. Ever since the closure of the borders, we have seen a marked reduction, about 10%, in terms of the evacuation of what you call loadouts of PMS, which equates to about 6 million liters per day, essentially because of the border closure, because of certain aspects we've also done as NNPC, working with our sister organizations, sister agencies, Nigerian Customs, DPR, Federal Ministry of Petroleum Resources, and other agencies, and also what we call Operation White, which is an intervention we have put in place to trace and track every molecule of petroleum products as they arrive in country through the vessels, as they move through the depots, and as they are evacuated with trucks out of the depots.
Oh boy, climb this thing now. No be only to connect lights.
Come you and yourself now.
Now wow. Oh boy, come down now. Oga Kasali electrician who will look for this. Oh. Oga Kasali, come help us fix this wire now.
Sorry, I no longer carry out illegal connection. It puts the lives of people at risk and can cause fire outbreak and disrupt power supply. I will never be part of anything that has to do with this any longer because change begins with me.
Oh boy, letting him talk makes sense. Oh boy, we could carry this ladder from
This message is brought to you by the National Orientation Agency in conjunction with the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
You are still watching Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the NTA. We thank you for staying with us up to this moment. Some Nigerians are beginning to contribute to the program by way of tweets. And of course, you've listened to our guests, and you understand that the situation is really precarious with respect to the supply of electricity to Nigerian consumers. Now, Kingsley, maybe we'll take a look at the tweets
and then return to our guest. Bode Fadikbe has this tweet. Says, did I hear, of course, he greets Kirian and I, so we'll skip that. Did I hear the Mama Man say that his company can produce 80 million meters in a day? Yahaya, that's for you. It says, please let him clarify. And secondly, from the submissions of Yahaya and Odion, it is obvious that the challenge with meter is not that of the discos.
Now, from Aboya Yema, meter should not be an issue if there is no corruption. They just want to tap money from the public. I live and work in Malabo, and here there is power 24 hours since my arrival without a blackout. But a country more advanced like this is having issues. I feel ashamed. That's a Nigerian living in Malabo.
That's right. Now, Haman Jida Gideado has this tweet. Lack of meter is exploitation in the electricity industry, but NEC has to put a period for all discos to meter their customers, as no bills will be issued for payment. NEC has already issued that. They said they gave the deadline of April 30th to say that, but how realistic that will be is an open question.
Okay, now, Chris Simeon, to curb the delay and bridge the gap in the Nigerian electricity supply industry, meter asset providers should work hand in hand with NEC, PHCN, and DISCOs to speed up the installation, distribution of meters to the electricity consumers.
Tunde Dixon, the outrageous billing system is killing, where they give a civil servant that lives on 30,000 a monthly bill of 40,000 naira.
All right, Mikhail said, he said, it's an irony for this to be the case. In whose interest do meters seem to be unavailable? Is it the discos, consumers? Why does the issue of meter availability appear to be shrouded in so much secrecy? And why is it that past attempts at alternative solutions often failed?
All right, so those are the tweets I want to take in the meantime. But I would like you to clarify that the tweet that came from Bode Fadikbe, once again, it says that you were claiming, according to him, that Momas can produce 80 million meters in a day. I mean, that's a bit outlandish, but it's for you to clarify very quickly, and I have another question for you guys in Lagos.
I'm sure you misheard. What we said was that we have an installed capacity of 30,000 meters, which is monthly. It's a monthly capacity of 30,000 meters, and that is what I said.
All right. Thank you very much. Kira, just before we come to Prince, because I want you to take this along, it has to do again with one of the set of challenges that the map players, let's put it that way, are facing, which is regulatory. Odion Mofama, you talked about the fact that you're having a uniform cost of meters throughout the country. I want you to explain. I mean, how is that a problem for you? Is that a problem for you or a problem for the discos? That the discos are saying they cannot have uniform price for meters throughout the country, and this is a regulation stipulated by the Electricity Regulatory Commission. How is this a challenge? That's one. And then I was also wondering if you're having a uniform price, and by the way, as you very well know, petroleum products, refined petroleum products, in particular petrol, has a uniform price throughout the country. We then have the PEF, which is the Petroleum Equalization Fund that pays the bridging sum. Does NEC have any subvention to whoever, whether to you or to DISCO? Because I believe once you have provided your meters, that is no longer your business. So the DISCOs to say to the extent that you are going to have a uniform price throughout the country, here is some subvention to you. But in fact, explain what you mean by having a uniform price for meters throughout the country and why that's a problem.
Thank you very much. The issue with a uniform price is for one simple reason. Not the meter cost itself, it is actually the cost of logistics. Actually, there's also the meter cost because every disco has different meter requirements. Some discos want Mercedes-Benz, some discos want just the simple type of meters that you can prepay on. But the single factor that should change the price of metering across discos is actually the cost of logistics moving into the locations. Yaya spoke about it. The cost of logistics metering someone in Ikeja Electric is definitely different from the cost of metering somebody in Kaduna Electric, because you have to then move the meters up north, and there's a haulage cost. There's also the cost of labor as well. So by the time you play those two factors, you should see some graduation in prices. But however, the pricing of the meters, the uniform price isn't such a big issue. What is the critical issue is that it doesn't really reflect the true cost of providing the metering service. That is actually the point, because by the time you look at it, you have to finance the meters, the capital cost of the meters, the installation cost, the accessories that come with the meters as well, and then also the operating cost of those meters. So by the time you add all that, the cost as we have today may not be sufficient to cover that. But in any case, MAPs are very, very determined to make sure the MAP regulation works, because the MAP regulation, in my view, is an excellent piece of regulation by the regulator. There's something that I really want to quickly clarify. Prince Will kept using the words deceitful, and we seem to be, it seems like there's a conspiracy in metering. Let me be very clear. Metering under the MAP regulation, the incentive to meter is high on the MAP, because you make no kobo, you make no naira until you put the meter on the man's wall. So no matter how much you've invested in the business, if the meter is not on the customer's wall, you do not make a penny, because the customers are paying into a lockbox that the MAPs cannot touch. So it's important to clarify this, that MAPs are definitely resolved to make sure that they roll out meters, because that's the only way they can realize their investment. It is different from the past metering schemes where government gave out contracts. And in some instance, in one particular instance, government went overseas, borrowed money via Eurobond, kept the $100 million aside, and till tomorrow, no meters have been deployed. So I can understand the pessimism, but at the same time, the MAP regulation is very different because it aligns incentives of the MAP, incentives of the DISCOs, and also the customer's incentive into one single focus whereby meters can be rolled out. So it's important to make this point. MAP is the way to go. MAP is not a Nigerian thing. It is, it operates in the UK, operates in Australia, and that's actually a financing tool to make sure that meters are rolled out as fast as possible. It's just the logistics we need to deal with.
Okay, thank you. You said that MAP is operational elsewhere in other climes. But what has baffled Nigerians over the years is that certain policies that worked elsewhere never worked in Nigeria. And that is why some people will bring in the elements of corruption into the entire process. And that is why it is not working. If MAP can work in the UK and in Australia or elsewhere, why can't it work in Nigeria? Already you are raising some vital issues that are making it impossible, for that to work. First, now we talked about a short while ago of haulage cost of shifting or moving the meters when they arrive in Lagos to different parts of the country. And Kingsley started with petrol. Petrol, of course, is also hauled around the nation. It moves from Lagos to different parts of the country. Yes, there's uniformity in terms of price. So if you're talking about uniformity of price of meters that is going to differ because of haulage or because of then, it's another matter altogether. Now, let's bring in Okorie once more. Okorie, please just watch your language and let us understand ourselves. Already there is a problem in the entire process, and we're trying to see how we can get out of it.
Yeah, thank you for giving me an opportunity again. Please, let me explain. What I meant was that if you want to go into a business, there has to be data. If the data is realistic, the person who wants to finance will now know that there will be profit. But when data is unrealistic, it becomes precarious for anybody to venture into that business. That's what I meant. That the figure of 10 million meters for Nigeria is not realistic in any way. Because in a state, you have about 2 million households. Times it by 36. You will now see the number of meters you'll be talking about in a year. Now talk less about 2-3 years. So it's quite unrealistic. That's what I meant by what I was saying. But again, look at another issue that will show you that this is not a realistic thing. Coca-Cola is a private company. The amount you drink Coca-Cola in Guzo is the same amount you drink Coca-Cola in Abuja. The same amount you drink it in Abia State. Coca-Cola is not complaining about logistics. They are there to do their business. We have Federal Competition and Consumer Protection Commission in place. Why will competition not be allowed to flow? Like I mentioned, the PIPP Vietan in Lagos that is doing private, and it is the same NEC that registered these independent electricity distribution networks. Why are they not allowed to compete? Because if you allow people do what PIPP Vietan is doing in Lagos and Ogun State to be done in many other states, this complaint will be reduced. If the state governors can look at what the state government in Lagos is doing with PIPP Vietan, it will change. Now look at, for instance, our association now want to do something with Smidan on SME electricity consumer protection. The question now is, count the number of SME operators in Nigeria. In this metering alone, capture SMEs. Are they not more than 30 million? And then you're talking about providing 6 million in a year or 2 years. So it's quite unrealistic. Exactly. Now, having said that, I do believe strongly that excluding consumer groups and policy analysts from discussion on the way to move the power sector forward is the problem we have. If you look at it, sorry, sir.
We're out of time. We're out of time. Prince Willie Okorie, always loaded. We'd like to appreciate you for being with us. As a power sector activist, thanks for being with us this morning. Jerry Bayom, electricity consumer, would like to appreciate you for being here on the program. And in Lagos, we were joined by Company Secretary of Momas, the manufacturers of prepaid electricity meters, Yahaya and Odion Omofoma, who is the Chief Executive Officer of New Hampshire Capital Limited. Gentlemen, we appreciate you for your insights, and we do hope that going forward, as Yaya gave the analogy, if you're going to Maiduguri from Lagos, now you are in Abuja, we hope that the journey continues on to Jos, and then from there, you sneak your way through Gombe, and then through Yobe, and then you are in Maiduguri. Gentlemen, thank you for being with us on Good Morning Nigeria today. Let's go over now to our sports desk.